All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to the Wombo Combo podcast. I'm Breaky CPK, joined by BSJ as always, and we got a fun show ahead for you guys. Obviously, a lot of Dota 2 currently taking place right now, and that's what we're going to do here on this episode, talk about the major qualifiers into the minor qualifiers that, of course, is happening. So we are doing this live recording on a little bit different day and time, so some things came up for myself, take blame for it, but had to reschedule, but to be honest, it gave us a little more talking points in terms of results and stuff that took place earlier on in this week, so maybe not the worst things ever. But BSJ, how you doing, man?
Confirming I'm not muted.
Yes, we're good.
Cool. First try. As always, I always do that correctly. I'm doing good, man. I had a nice weekend off and hadn't had the chance to watch too much of the Dota. Just spent a little bit of time kind of catching up on the offlane meta for myself to kind of understand, what are people trying to do with these heroes. I'm seeing a lot of Slardars and all that kind of stuff. So I was kind of trying to understand, what I missed. It's amazing how in Dota, if you miss 2 or 3 days, sometimes you're like, wait, when did this hero become popular and all that kind of stuff. So for someone like myself, I always feel need to stay extremely current. So it's kind of funny how quickly you fall behind, but I'm doing good. No, that was a long answer. Ready to talk about all the stuff that's been going on.
It's the ever-evolving game, man. I mean, that's one of the many reasons that we like this, that we love this game really in Dota, isn't it? That it's just constantly shifting. And so, to your point there, yet another case here. As far as these major qualifiers taking place, there's been patches in between, of course, the recent major to finish up, and now these qualifiers, and we certainly are seeing a bit of that. And yeah, Slaughter was actually one of those heroes, as you mentioned, that. I want to say out of nowhere. I mean, personally, I feel like this hero has been pretty solid for a while, and I've been a fan of it. The mobility of him that he brings to the table and that heavy burst damage, if you timing, of course, the stuns as far as the auto attacks go. But that on top of it, now seeing Snapfire and Void Spirit, it really has been something here. So, I mean, well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think that the offlane meta has kind of shifted where it's really hard to win your lane against a lot of the carries people are picking. You're often picking your offlaner before you pick the carry. So we've been kind of seeing a shift to offlaners that kind of are expected to lose their lane, and then they just have really big impact on the game. Slardar, we've seen some Clockwork. I've seen some more Darkseer, Pangoliers, these types of heroes that last patch we really didn't see at all. Last patch we kind of saw these like lane dominator, Timbersaw, Doom type heroes. Mm-hmm. Really, the only exception to this is Enchantress, and she's so highly sought after that she's getting first rounded and then countered so hard that she's being moved to a support position. So if you want to gain some MMR in pubs right now, just learn how to play Enchantress offlane. That shit is easy MMR. I will say that right now.
There you go.
If you know what you're doing.
With that said, guys, before we get too much into this, I want to reiterate, obviously, thank you for tuning in. If you happen to be tuning into the live show, even if you're watching this on the VOD or the after the fact, be sure to go to our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/prediction esports. Hit that follow button. Even subscriptions are welcome. It does help support us here. The umbrella of podcasts, us being, of course, the Wombo Combo Dota 2 podcast, but many esport podcasts here to enjoy. So definitely appreciate the support that you can give. All right, continuing on further, though, as far as our content goes for today, again, the big part of this, going over the majors. There is some roster stuff to talk about as well, and even throughout the discussion here as far as how the results have been looking so far. But without further ado, I think it's ready to get right into it, and let's just say the European region is the focus for good reason when it comes to these qualifiers, especially with the announcement of NIP going back to Europe, going into it, and now with their roster change, both OGs qualifying via the open qualifiers, by the way, OG Seed and, of course, OG themselves, and obviously this is the debut of OG's roster as well. There's potentially 6, even 7 of these teams that you could look at going into this, and anyone could have got these 3 spots, right? And that's actually part of the discussion I wanted to start with, where 3 spots for the major, only 1 spot for the minor. Now, of course, this is consistent with how they've been doing the format all season, so we shouldn't be surprised in that sense, where if you get 3 spots for the major, you only get 1 for the minor. If you get 2 for the major, then you get 2 for the minor. But there is some debate being brought up, more so than I think previously, that Europe deserves at the very least 2 minor spots instead of the 1 that has been given to them. So starting with that, I mean, I'll let you, BSJ, give your take and how you feel on this.
I think this gets talked about a lot, and I'm just going to be short and sweet. I think NA is a trash region for the most part. Like, I think if you look at the 5th best team in NA, it's like, who's that? What are they? Like, and then you
Zalato!
put them against, yeah, and you put them against the top 4, and it's like a joke. Like, the difference between 4th and 5th is insane. And then in the European region, you have a team like Aggressive Mode and NIP who just like move back, and suddenly you have Liquid and Alliance not in the major qualifier, right? Like, they're not even having a chance to qualify for the major, and there's only 1 slot left in the minor. Like, Liquid, Alliance, or Nigma is just not going to go to anything. Like, that's obviously Nigma looking less than impressive, but I just think NA is a joke. So, I'm surprised it keeps happening. That's the TLDR of my opinion on this.
So you would take the spot away from NA and give it to Europe. You wouldn't mind that happening, it sounds like.
Yes, I think NA does not deserve 4 slots at all.
That's fair. My take on this is kind of similar to yours. Yeah, we understand that, when it comes to NA as a region, maybe not as strong, and I could see that. And if that was to happen, if the adaptation was to happen as the season moves on, if Valve is willing to make these kind of changes as it progresses, I'm fine with that. I will, to kind of play a little bit of devil's advocate, though, on the other side, because there's a lot of people that are advocating for it, and I get why. And again, I wouldn't be the most surprised if they ended up doing it. Let's be careful in terms of going overboard here when it comes to saying, oh, well, in theory, all these teams are so much better than these other teams, so they deserve this many more spots. I mean, there's a reason why we got rid of the invite system in the past, especially before the DPC. And if you really kind of think back, there was a lot of flaws when it came to that, with this whole inviting these teams that are quote-unquote just better than others because of their rosters or players that happen to that we just know that much better than others. And yes, in most cases, that's a fair way to evaluate the teams that we're looking at and whether or not they're deserving, and ultimately the results can speak for that. But we've also, every season, we have both teams and especially players that come out of nowhere, it feels like, and represent themselves and make a point that, wait a second, we deserve a shot ourselves. So this idea that just way over the top of like, oh, give Europe, another spot, even 2 more spots. I mean, you even said it yourself. Nigma in these very qualifiers, they frankly didn't look too good. We had a team like Aggressive Mode, for example, kind of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere. It's a solid roster, but this is a team that you would not expect defeating teams like Nigma and so on to ultimately do what they're doing. So again, I just go back to be careful on going a little too extreme in terms of this specific region is so deserving compared to others. I want to at least leave a little bit of room to have this chance for the lesser teams and the players to continue to prove themselves.
I mean, I'm just purely based off results, and what was it, last major, like 4 of the top 6 or something, or EU, maybe 3 or whatever, like 3 of the top 6 are EU. To me, that's like good enough to prove to me, if say we give 4 slots to the major or 3 slots to the major and 2 to the minor for EU, and EU just doesn't place well at the next major, that's fine. Like, I don't think invite systems are good, as you said, but I do think handing out invites based on previous results is a thing. Like, I almost think NA could have been warranted to be given another extra slot it makes sense that NA got 3 slots to the second major, because in the first major of the year, 2 NA teams placed top 6. Like, I think that's good enough to prove that maybe NA deserves a 3rd slot for a major. And it's like, if that happens, right, we have 2 teams in top 6, and then after that we have 1 team in the top 2, and then every other team gets like last place, then suddenly maybe we don't deserve those slots. I'm just saying that I think this could be a much more dynamic system. I don't think it needs to be, what do you call it? Just kind of set in stone that every region gets 4 slots. It's just whether or not they get 3 to the major or 2 to the major. That's my issue. I think we can look at how good these teams are doing, and you could just look at the NA qualifiers. Like, it's a joke. It really is. Like, you have the top 4 teams who are respectable teams, and then all the others are teams that have been together for less than a week. Like, they're just stacks that are thrown together. And it's just sad, but that's what the NA region is. And we can't ignore that, is all I'm saying. So that's, yeah, I there's definitely argument both sides, and I get that. And like, I'm the last one that wants like the worst for NA region, but if we can't prove ourselves to be more than 4 teams, then we don't deserve to be treated like we are. And if we only have 4 teams, why should we have 4 slots? Like, you're just saying a decent team in NA is going to go to a major or minor every single time, while in a region like EU, you have to prove yourself, which isn't that what qualifiers are? Is proving yourself, right? So, yeah, that's
I was gonna say, I going to the qualifier aspect, I definitely agree there that if it is gonna be this format of only having the 3 European and that 1 for minor, ideally the qualifier there should be a more extensive qualifying format in terms of not this GSL. I guess it's not GSL. Excuse me. It's not. But yeah, the first stage, and then essentially 3 of the 5 teams are eliminated after this first stage of the event. That feels like it happens too quick for being so much on the line and this competitive, especially as it is in the European region. So
I thought it should be 6 teams, where like the top 2 in each group or top 1 in each group get a bye, and
sure.
then the second, third play each other. So I agree with you. Like in the regions like EU, where 3 teams qualify, only 4 teams advance from the group stage. Like, what is that? I was kind of like, that's so confusing. You make it past the group stage and you win a single best of 3 and you're qualified. Like, that's really strange to me. You know, I'm not taking away, obviously, the teams that qualify are very good. You know, I just think that if you get third in your group in EU and you're just out of the running, that's pretty brutal. You know, that could be a single best of 1, or like you dropped 1 game in a best of 2 that you maybe shouldn't have dropped. And I don't think qualifiers should be that unforgiving. So,
kind of going a little bit further into that, even I think one of the main reasons they do this format is because of, you know, scheduling purposes and wanting to get the teams as soon as possible, right? But I feel like it's kind of left over from the previous seasons where especially we had more, I guess maybe it wasn't more tournaments last season, but it felt like maybe it was more compact. At least the very first season, it definitely was more. But I feel like it's a leftover fact, and that hasn't really been looked over enough to be like, wait a second, we have a little bit more time. Why not draw out these qualifiers, especially since the minor is now part of the major qualifiers with how they compacted it this season. So why not draw it out further, take a little bit more time, create more of a storyline when it comes to the online aspect that then goes into the major. Because, you know, let's be honest, when it comes to the major events themselves, even the minors, of course, we almost forget like how these teams qualified. And yes, they may have some cool little video that tells us, oh yeah, this is all, like, oh, that's right, they had to be that team. But what's the idea of actually having that storyline created that then leads up into the event? And I know there's logistics. I'm not saying they should play qualifiers until like the week before, but at least a little bit closer. And it seems like that they could definitely take advantage of that when it comes to using more of a window to appreciate these qualifiers and allow the teams to truly earn said spots in the end.
I agree. I mean, I think next year they've kind of hinted with this whole league system that they plan on having a more extensive period between the majors where it's not just do or die over the course of 3 days to whether or not you go to a big tournament. But, you know, just because you're changing the system next year, does that really mean you have to wait until then to do anything? Yeah. You know, that's kind of my issue. As you've already kind of pointed out, they're just kind of, this is the system they have. There's definitely, I can understand there's things that you don't see coming, right? But why can't you just adjust it slightly every major or whatever? You know, you obviously learn your lesson pretty quick when you're like, oh, you know, first round of majors felt like, you know, this team didn't qualify for the major because they got third in their group by 1 game to a team. And it's like, is that really a good way to determine who deserves to go? I don't think so. You know, that kind of stuff. So, I mean, either way, I just look forward to next year when they change the system. I just think it's sad they have to wait that long.
I mean, they don't, but yeah, it's
or that they're choosing to wait.
They're choosing to, yeah. I mean, we'll see. It's they did make that adaptation from the first and the second cycle, as you mentioned, especially with NA. So who's to say they won't see this reaction, especially, and be like, okay, maybe we did overlook at it. Cycle 4, let's go ahead and make the change. I mean, I'm still under the impression that we may see some changes this season. But yeah, it sounds like that. I mean, at least I almost convinced myself there, I guess, that I think ultimately I would love to see even a format change that extends a period rather than simply giving another spot to a region or whatever. I really hope for that, especially next season, that that is thought of and comes about. I know CSGO, actually, I believe they kind of do that. I believe they do have like that 3 major system a year themselves, and they really have these on the online qualifiers, and even I think some of them are even LAN portion qualifiers to the actual major events. Maybe we could see something like that. But anyways, that's another topic, and we'll see if that eventually comes out there. But all right, so that leads us now into we are starting to get results. In fact, so as we're recording this podcast, here it is Tuesday night, and currently the North American and the SA regions are playing. We'll get into that actually shortly. But I'm sticking with the European region. I wanted to continue to go over that. We've already kind of touched on it a little bit. Nigma, one of the more surprises in terms of a negative aspect. They went 1-1-2 in their groups. They ended up getting knocked or finishing third, so that means no major for them. They'll have to compete in the minor qualifiers coming up. But yeah, even further to your point, NIP and Liquid, they actually tied for second place in their group. They played a best of 1 at the beginning of today, and NIP ended up winning that. So suddenly NIP still has that major spot of contention, and Liquid's now going to the minor qualifiers themselves. But as of this podcast show, we currently have both Team Secret and OG going to the major. It'll be NIP versus Aggressive Mode. Aggressive Mode, a team of Skitter, Bornesia, Skylark, Lil, and Spartan. Those 2 teams will be playing for the final European spot. But again, no surprises here in Secret. OG, I'm a little surprised. It's not the craziest thing ever, but a little surprised with how well they played, especially considering it's a very new roster together and how tough Europe is. But those are the 2 teams.
I don't know, man. That team, I would be shocked under the captaining of No Tail if players of that caliber aren't able to pull together. And I did say last week that what I liked about this roster specifically is the player personalities and play style just work together. Like Sumail, hyper aggressive player, mid 1, pretty crazy player himself, and that's like exactly what they needed on OG, right? Like that's what Thompson and No Tail are all about on that roster. So I think that's why it's working, even if they haven't played together for very long. Obviously, just very good players that all work together very nicely. The funny comment I have to say is the SA qualifiers. I don't know the exact update, but they were doing like a 3-way tie that were all best of 1s, and they kept round robining it where 2 teams were beating each other. All 3 teams were beating each other.
Yep.
So now they're in this, like, they were on the 3rd game as we started this podcast, and I don't know exactly where they're at with this, but they've been playing they've been playing a tiebreaker almost all day today. So the best of 1 tiebreakers is kind of funny to me. You know, it kind of goes along with, I laugh at it, but I think it's a pretty bad way of tie breaking a best of 1. Like, you're telling me that Liquid and NIP, the chance to go to the major is decided by a best of 1. You know, I think that's just kind of just flawed. You know, that's really all I got about that one. And right at this moment, we're watching, I just have it on in the background, Business Associates versus XJ Storm versus Chaos. So a lot to be decided in the next day or 2. As you said, we've already seen a decent amount of results coming out today. Going into our next point, you have it where TNC didn't qualify for the major, and they even had to play a best of 1 tiebreaker to have a chance at the minor.
They still have that.
Or they have to play.
We don't even. Oh no, I apologize. No, they did. I'm sorry. Yeah, with the Southeast Asian time, it's confusing. Yes, they beat Reality Rift, as you mentioned, that tiebreaker there. So yeah, if they didn't win that best of 1, they actually wouldn't even be going to the minor qualifiers, and that's just wow. Right, like that's just crazy. Or there's potential at least. So, but yeah, okay. So Southeast Asia, obviously interesting in itself, and the highlight there certainly TNC not qualifying. I don't want to say I told you so, but it kind of goes back to this point. It's again, this team is very, very skilled team, but it seems like as keeping it up throughout the season, it was going to be a bit of an issue. And here they are now, barely qualifying for last major, and now not even qualifying for this one. Hey, we'll still see them at TI. I feel like in the end, especially, of course, what that would happen at the first. I guess they've already kind of guaranteed that anyways, but you get that point. But not thracking it too much. Now, hopefully they qualify for the minor, of course, or else that's going to be something. And again, Southeast Asia, though, they only got that one minor spot in the end, so it's definitely no guarantee there when it comes to them qualifying. But the other teams, so sticking with Southeast Asia, you got Fnatic and Geek Fam, the other two teams, and then you have Adroit versus IO Dota 2 will be the other two teams that'll be playing for the spot. But yeah, the other storyline for Southeast Asia is unfortunate in the sense that yet another case of internet issues. Last cycle for those major qualifiers, in fact, against TNC, we had, I think it was Signa Ultra, if I'm not mistaken. They had internet issues in the Game 3 against TNC to go to the major. Ultimately, now again, TNC was ahead at that point, but still, they ultimately had to forfeit it in the end because the internet issues just came to a point where they couldn't connect it back into the game. Here we are in this new cycle, and Adroit actually had internet issues against Fnatic in their opening playoff series, and ultimately had to forfeit at least the first game of that series. They did end up playing the second game. They had to go to a LAN cafe. It was really delayed. They lost in 17 minutes in game 2. So Fnatic won that series 2-0. Not really much else to say about that other than Southeast Asia especially seems to have these issues, unfortunately. And, what are you going to do, though, right? It's part of the game, and you hate to see it, but I guess life moves on there.
Yeah.
At least there's another chance.
Like you said, you hate to see it. I don't know what else to say about that. I've had twice in my career that internet issues hurt the team I was on in a qualifier, and it's just how much work goes into these teams, making it to where they do, and just having something out of your control be the reason why you lose. I just harp on that as being so demoralizing in a game that's already frustrating enough, and it's just sad to see. I don't know the fix myself in the SCA region, why a team like a Droid has to play from a LAN cafe is beyond me. Why do they not have the resources to have 5 PCs and a shitty apartment? I don't know, actually. I'm not trying to be rude. Maybe I'm just ignorant about it. I think that overall living in SCA, at least in certain countries, is very cheap. So can't we just invest? Like, if you're going to have a team, why are you going so half-ass on it? Like, why is your team training at a LAN cafe? I don't know. I would just hate to think to myself that I'm doing all that I can to qualify, and I lose for something I can't to do anything about.
Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, and it's one of those things, from my experience, I've had the chance to travel to several Southeast Asian countries, Thailand especially, back in my Han days, many of times, and I know, at least in that area, very prevalent when it comes to these LAN cafes and the players playing from them, but yeah, when it comes to stable internet, it seems like that is an issue for whatever reason, so it is one of those on paper, it seems like, come on, just spend maybe a little bit more resources to make sure that's not the case, but it's easy for us to say that, when you're not
just
there kind of situation.
Internet,
yeah. Little forehead.
Apparently the internet providers are pretty trash there, is what somebody in chat is saying. And there's a chance that they might have even had a boot camp and just not even been able to use the internet at their boot camp. So that's just a travesty. I don't have anything else to say about that. That's just, now what? You're living in a region that can't even provide you with good enough internet to do your job. I mean, as a streamer and somebody who's been relying on the internet to do my job for 5 years, whenever I have internet problems, it's probably the most frustrating thing in the actual entire work field of this job is to just be like, hey, I'm going to go stream or I'm going to go make money. And then you just can't do it because your internet. It's like, oh, So I can sympathize on that regard, but I always imagine there's a solution somewhere. But if teams are having that much issue, I think it probably speaks more to the region and something fundamentally being wrong with the system rather than the teams themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely been there myself, streaming and casting to 20,000 plus viewers. All of a sudden, the internet goes down. You're like, well, I hate my life right now.
Yeah, that's about right.
It's not fun times there. It's yeah, you can only imagine, like you said, especially with what they're going through with the major spot on the line. You know, the silver lining, as mentioned, they still have another chance. IO Dota 2 going to be their opponent in about 5 hours from now, as we're actually doing this live podcast here. Is when they're going to play them. IO Dota 2, by the way, it's that newer roster of Miracle, the Southeast Asian Miracle. I try to say it like that. Ben-Hur, Bimbo, Ohio, and Mushi is their roster. So it's actually very solid roster there. Could certainly see that one going either way for that major spot. But yeah, goes back to TNC not qualifying for the majors. Certainly the big storyline out of Southeast Asia. The next topic, yeah, you already kind of touched on it a little bit anyways, but South America, yeah, as we're speaking, literally in their third cycle of a best-of-one tiebreaker because of that three-way tie that happened between Furia, Beast Coast, and Infamous. And, I mean, it's interesting to see, you know, the fact that it's still going on is kind of funny / not at the same time, but the storyline here is that Beast Coast potentially could not qualify for the major, getting even to the major playoff qualifiers. And this is, you think South American Dota, you think Beast Coast, right? Like, is what the run they had last season and what they've already done this season to an extent. So that would certainly be something if they fall short. But both Infamous and Furia clearly giving them a run for their money. And again, even the two teams that qualify out of these tiebreakers then have to play against the two other teams in Pain Gaming and Thunder Predator to then try to claim one of those two spots for South America. But yeah, this goes back to the format. We've already kind of harped on that though. But go ahead.
I'm going to give you a little bit of insider information. Maybe I'm not supposed. I don't think this is confidential. Maybe it is. That I've been alerted that Beast Coast does not scrim. So
Okay.
like they literally do not scrim. So my guess would be that this patch is actually pretty different than 7.23. A lot changed just by like change to neutral items, change to the map, slight buffs and nerfs to heroes. So the hero meta is very different. Let me tell you, like I spent a large majority of the last like 3 weeks spamming Enchantress, spamming Mars. I've been even spamming Clockwork, you know, playing Slardar. Like I'm trying to expand my offlane hero pool, and I just have to guess that the fact that they don't scrim is probably making it so this new meta is like a big problem for them. I think that the other teams probably just have a better sense of what's good right now. I personally have not watched Beast Coast games, but to have a team that's dominant for a region, even be struggling to get out of the groups is, you know, indicative of something drastic, right? So that would be my theory craft. It looks like somebody's saying Beast Coast did now win, so there's no more of this tiebreaker.
I was just looking at that myself just to kind of confirm. And yeah, so Beast Coast did win their first two of this next stage of the tiebreakers. So yeah, Beast Coast at least, again, they haven't qualified for the major. They've now qualified for the chance to play for the major. So good for them, at least getting that spot. And it will be Furia versus Infamous for then that final playoff spot right there. So finally, after 3 rounds of best-of-one tiebreakers, it will be coming to an end with that there.
I mean, even then, like even though they qualified, everything I said still applies. The
Sure.
fact that they struggled to get that is pretty telling itself. The series going on right now, the Business Associates versus Chaos, I think is quite a good series. The first game was quite the 3-2-2 back and forth. I think it added up to like 1288 at some point. And this last game, Business Associates had a pretty massive advantage, and now it's coming down to the wire. So definitely, if you missed this series, probably worth checking it out. I'm not going to spoil either way. So obviously it goes game 3, but you know that's about the only spoil you're going to get at.
All right, fair enough. EG on the other side, I'll spoil that one. They did 2-0 fighting Panda, so they're in the upper bracket finals there. But again, this being only 2 teams qualifying for the major, it's a little bit different than some of these other regions. And I'm actually looking at the schedule too. I'm a little surprised. They only play the 2 best-of-3s today. And then tomorrow is when we'll actually get to find out, again, as we're doing this podcast, which of the both of the teams that'll qualify out of NA. So it goes down to the final day there before we get said information. But obviously have predictions there, and we'll actually go over those here in a second. as we'll move on to the next topic eventually. But I guess that leaves us with what? Oh, CIS we haven't mentioned yet. In CIS, one of the more interesting results to me, Gambit actually not getting out of the groups. They ended up getting knocked out in the group, so they're going to have to play in the minor qualifiers. But currently, it's Hellraisers and Navi playing in the upper bracket finals for the playoffs. And then you got Virtus Pro and Cyber Legacy going to be in the lower region there. Of course, CIS, Dota in these between the cycles, this last one, there's a bit of roster changing that took place from teams. CIS to me continues to be the who the hell knows what's going to happen, especially this season with no longer having that one dominant team that we've seen in years past. So,
yeah, Gambit also lost GPK due to all that shenanigans going on with VP and contract issues. So GPK was really what a lot of people are saying was their X factor. So to have GPK be out of the picture is a pretty significant loss for a team like Gambit. So even though it's kind of like what's happening, all this kind of stuff, it is almost predictable that Gambit would struggle to make it to the major.
I'm noticing Team Spirit actually not qualifying even for the minor themselves. So Team Spirit, another one of these teams that may be a little surprising, but no minor or major for them when it comes to this cycle. But again, a very chaotic region and one where it seems like anything can happen from cycle to cycle. So keeping an eye on that. See who qualifies for the major, then eventually the minor there. That leaves us with China. Now, we haven't brought this up until now because, in case you haven't heard, matches have been postponed. Of course, there's that whole coronavirus going around, in case you haven't, and living under a rock. No, but especially in China, it's very prevalent over there. So the idea that the matches were postponed, not the most surprising. From my understanding, though, as of right now, they're going to try to get the matches played starting in the next couple of days here. So I know there's been a lot of rumors out there as far as what's going to happen. I mean, we don't know, right? Like this is one of those things, that happens in the world where you kind of just let it run its course, and we'll see where it goes from here. There could be some radical things that take place in terms of no Chinese team for the major. You would hope it doesn't come to that, but certainly any possibility is there. But from what I understand, they are going to look to get these qualifiers played, and that'll be coming up in a couple of days. There is still one storyline, though, in that Vici Gaming is not playing. They have chosen to sit out this cycle like other teams had, of course, at the beginning of the season. Vici's like, we did pretty well the first two majors. Let's take a rest. We're probably in a good spot already to qualify for TI-10 at this point anyways. I guess you can't blame them.
Yep. I will say time and time again, Dota is an incredibly difficult game and exhausting game to constantly be on top of. And I give credit to where it's due that these teams that have a good, like you said, they already pretty much qualified to TI. Like, why not? It's a good time of the year to take a break. You still come back focused for the end of the season and obviously for TI. So now is a good time. You already secured your spot pretty much. What time's better than now? And, I have a little tidbit. I just remember this back from when I was in high school that I was running track and I was trying to get a scholarship and I was struggling to get the best time, or I was really trying to break 49 seconds on the 400 meter. And I couldn't do it. And I hit 49.1 like 5 meets in a row. And then what happened was I got invited to go to the beach with a few friends over spring break. And originally my dad and I were kind of like, I don't think I should do that. Like, it's the middle of track season. I shouldn't take any time off. And eventually I got convinced to take the time off. And I came back 3 days after that and I ran a 48.3. Like, I ran my best time right after taking a break. And sometimes, man, you just get consumed in competition. I know that's just a small little story from my life, but sometimes you just need a break, man. Sometimes that's like the best solution. I think that goes for anybody. And like a lot of people say, BSJ, how do I untilt? How do I unwind from like a bad streak of pubs, or if it's in real life, whatever. It's like, just take a step back,
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's impossible to be clear-headed in the midst of all the crap. So that's my little,
how to reset. I like it. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing to say. And I mean, I guess my little story on that is that, well, not really a story, but I have the family I married into, I should say, has a cabin 3 or 4 hours up north here in Michigan, where I'm from, that we like to go up to, especially during the summer, of course, and just hang out up there. And you unplug from everything. There's actually no internet access up there, and no phone access, etc. So, that might sound scary to some people, and I understand why, but
outside,
yeah,
no internet.
It's crazy, right? No, but it is nice to do that sometimes. So I could definitely relate there, in that getting that resetting, getting that R&R, certainly good for anyone out there. So yeah, no surprises here. Absolutely, they have every right to do so. So Vici Gaming, enjoy the rest. I assume they'll be back for Cycle 4, but now I guess that does bring up an interesting point, because we haven't seen it yet this season so far. We saw it at the beginning, but will that mean that Vici Gaming will have to play open qualifiers in Cycle 4? I didn't really look that up or see anything about that.
Probably. It's based on the last major minor cycle, isn't it?
I think so. I think you're right. So I guess that's the one downside of taking the break in the end, outside of missing out on potential money there. But hey, I'm sure they'll be fine. We also thought the same for LGD, and they weren't so fine. So, speaking of that, let's just talk about that now while we're on that topic, because you're in China here. LGD is set to play in the open qualifiers. The roster is going to look a little different, though, and this came a little bit of surprise, I'm sure, to many out there, especially considering we haven't seen them yet this season, really, with them losing the open qualifiers last cycle. But I don't think it was necessarily because of that. Now, I have nothing to suggest why I believe that, but just my intuition suggests that this maybe was just a move that might have been coming for a while, and they felt like it was time to do it now. Ame, no longer their carry player. Ajit stepping in as their carry player instead. So CDEC, of course, they essentially trading core players right there, as Ame then goes to CDEC himself. But long-time LGD player, this is a team that's been very consistent these last couple of years. Same roster, not the same. So what did you think when you heard the LGD change?
I mean, it's just you never know what's going on within these teams. That's all I gotta say. Sometimes like one really bad thing can happen, and you just decide to take a break on one player, or the team decides they're better off without that player. It's just always so hard to look from the outside in and be like, yeah, this is probably what happened. It's just always so random. So many random things can occur, and yeah, that's just all I got to say about it. It always trips me up a bit when I see that kind of caliber of a team even remove one player.
Yeah.
Or if one player decides to step down, well, whoever decides, it's always pretty crazy to me.
Especially in the China scene, they definitely do things different over there, where the teams and how they interact with one another, I think is a good way to put it. They are almost, I want to be careful here, because they are almost a little bit more professional than other regions. There are plenty of reasons why you could say that's not the case, but the point being that when it comes to these, trading players with one another, they do it more officially with contracts and everything. So they treat it more of like that league that some other esports titles would even have out there. But it seems so. Yeah, we don't know. Was this more the management decision? Was this more the players? Yeah, we really just don't know. It hasn't really come out outside of the brief message that they gave, which, as usual, didn't really tell us much when it came to this transaction here. So
a lot said without anything being told.
There you go. That's a good way to put it. I will say this about Ajit specifically. First off, I love saying his name. It's just one of those fun names to say. But second off, when I was first getting into the Dota 2 scene, like really starting to, I left Han, I was like, all right, gonna start grinding some Dota 2 now. I went to the Boston Major. That was my first event there. Ajit was actually, I decided to do some research on a lot of the teams and players, just kind of prep myself and treat myself as if I'm, casting it or whatever. And Ajit stood out as one of the more higher standout players in terms of stats. His stats were ridiculous. Now, a lot of it came from online play, but specifically in the SEA region. But when it came to just farming in general, the guy was just up there as far as the top of the GPM and the net worth went and everything. So I believe at the time he played for, they were called Warrior Gaming Unity. WG Unity was the name, I believe. But point is, very awesome player there, stat-wise. So good to see him on a very solid roster, of course, in LGD. And I have high expectations, I guess, is the ultimate point there, especially with a team like LGD. Let's just say I think they should qualify at least for the closed qualifiers. Get out of open. That's a start.
One step at a time.
Yeah. Could you imagine? Dear God. Yeah, the pressure is definitely on them, but yeah, you would hope and think that that's not going to be an issue for that team. All right, I think that goes over all the regions as far as results and how they've been shaping up so far. I figured that the last thing to do is maybe give our predictions in terms of how we think things could shape up. But so let's go ahead and get into our betonline.ag bold predictions of the week. Betonline.ag is your online sportsbook expert. Use the promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, for 50% off or a 50% welcome bonus even. So when it comes to predictions right here, we mentioned, obviously we already have some results from these qualifiers, but NA, let's start with that one. I know you bring it up a lot for good reason, and NA fans here. We still have all 4 teams. It's going to go into tomorrow before we start figuring out who the teams are going to be that qualified. You got EG Fighting Pandas, Business Associates, aka J-Storm, and Chaos. Of those 4, who do you see qualifying for the major?
I'm going to make a bold one here. Listen here. Just be careful. So make sure you're sitting down. I'm going to go with EG to be one of the 2 teams to qualify. I know that's a stretch, but I really do think they're coming around as a squad. And then the other one's pretty tough. Chaos, spoiler alert, Chaos did just win the series, so they were the other team in the upper bracket. Okay. But I do believe that it is kind of a toss-up, and I'm gonna vote for Fighting Pandas. I think those 3 teams are very shaky, and I watched that Business Associates Chaos series, and they just did not look that great, either team. So it felt like whatever team was winning ended up losing because they just didn't play clean enough in order to win the series or win the game itself. So I'm gonna go with Fighting Pandas as the second team.
All right. EG, there's no question there. It's not going to try to debate otherwise, but I'm going to go with Chaos. I'll go with Chaos, not only to be a little bit different, but I think that the Biver pickup was a very good one, former Han player, so naturally I'm a fan of his, but he's been a player that's bounced around a lot from CIS region, even a little bit of Europe, and now, of course, in the NA region, stepping in, MSS going to Offlane, but he's done that in the past. It seems like that this is a roster that, you just look at it, and from what they've done recently at least too, it's hard to see them not qualifying for the major. So EG and Chaos for me would be those bold predictions there. so bold.
But settle down with all that boldness you got there.
the other 2 will qualify for the minor anyway, so whatever, right?
Yeah, exactly.
One can wish. Here's a bold prediction. Fuck it. Zalotl, they're gonna qualify for the minor. My boy Zalotl are finally gonna do it.
They're back, man. Yeah, or they're there. They're not back,
they never there. Been. Cut that. Yeah. No. Yeah. I hope, man. They're one of those stories. Kind of a sidetrack here, but it's a lot. I've gotten the chance to cast these guys a fair amount, just being NA qualifying casting coverage throughout the years, and just seeing us. They're not full Mexican squad now anymore, technically, but still, from South or Central America, there for the most part, 4 of their 5 being Mexican players. It's not a country, especially that you think Dota 2, but it would just be something not only for that country, but just in general to see a team like that on the big stage. So similar to. We've been starting to see some UK representation sprinkle in to these teams. Tanner, of course, the big name there out of NIP. Saw some more today. So I guess, you know what, let's just transition there to Europe. We've already mentioned those 2 teams that have qualified in Secret and OG, so that leaves both NIP in aggressive mode. Who you got, BSJ?
Let's go aggressive mode.
Oof.
I'm down for the PBD Lil drama.
I love it.
Even though I like PBD, I enjoy the salt, and I want to see it flow.
I love it. PPD versus Lil. Oh, this is so good. We would love to have, webcams of those guys or like a mic on them even just to hear reactions. But
that would be good stuff.
Yeah. I gotta say, I honestly am a little surprised to even see. Frankly, I'm surprised to see both these teams here, of course, at this point. But really, NIP, I did not think this team was going to come together right away, and this being the European region, of course, and how difficult it is. We talked about that. But I did watch their game against Liquid earlier today, especially, and they looked good. They stomped Liquid, frankly. They deserved that best of 1 tiebreaker there. one game. But apparently also Tanner has been playing well. His hero pool may be a little limited from what I'm understanding, but when he gets a Shadow Fiend, and there's another one that I'm blanking right now on especially, but he does very well. So, and Dahak, I've always been sold on, especially in the Gambit days. So I guess in there, maybe it's not as surprising, but they came together a little more quick than I expected. So I'm going to go with NIP once again to be a little different right there. Long-winded way of saying that. So I got to say I'm pissed that Liquid didn't, to bias point here, but I'm going to ESL LA, by the way. I'm just going to be going as a fan and everything. Was really hoping they would qualify, man.
Feels bad, man.
They can go through the minor, I guess. Certainly
yeah, there
possible.
You go.
All they have to do is beat Nigma, Alliance, and whoever else now in the minor qualifiers to even get to the minor. Oh God, that's gonna be tough.
That's what we call an oof.
Yeah, that's quite the oof. All right, so other regions. Let's not as long-winded, I suppose, but Southeast Asia, Adroit versus IO Dota 2.
I haven't gotten to watch Adroit at all, but I did watch IO, and they didn't look all that great to me, so I'll go with Adroit.
Okay. Yeah, Adroit's, of course, major team themselves. They were at the last major, right? I believe it was, yeah.
I believe it was, yeah.
Second major there, so wouldn't be the most surprising ever. I want to say Adroit, but I can't, man. With the internet issues, mental state, you got to wonder. IO Dota 2. At least the roster does feel good, so I'll go with them. Once again, going to be different there, but interesting to hear that we weren't the most impressed by them though when it came to their play. So we'll see how that goes. CIS, we already mentioned. So it's only going to be 2 teams, but you got Hellraiser, Na'Vi, Virtus Pro, and Cyber Legacy. 2 of those 4. What do you got?
I'm gonna go Na'Vi and VP. Let's go VP. You got this.
VP's coming back. All right, Na'Vi VP. Yeah, I'm gonna go with I'm actually gonna go Hellraisers at least because again this is CIS and different teams seems like they qualify every time, so I'm gonna go Hellraisers for sure, and I'll just play it easy. I'll go Na'Vi as well. They did look good at the last cycle major, at least earlier on, so I'm confident to go with them. So yeah, Hellraiser, Na'Vi there. And then that takes us into, South America, I guess, would be the last one. So South America, I'm going to say Beast Coast and Thunder Predator going back.
I can't really disagree with that one.
All right. We'll see. Again, they're still in that tiebreaker. Thank God it's finally... God, if they actually would have got... because the tiebreaker rules eventually gets to a point where it suggests that they're supposed to do a coin flip. So I was kind of wondering, like, would it actually get to that point with them playing all these tiebreakers? But apparently not. They got through 3, and that'll be it. Okay, well, I think that does it for our bold predictions. So there you go. There you have it, the betonline.ag bold predictions of the week. Remember to use promo code BLUEWIRE, all one word, for your 50% welcome bonus at betonline.ag. But BSJ, I think we're good for this week. Done for the night. Anything else to add?
As always, no. And I'm actually going to not add anything.
Fair enough. Hit that follow button, guys. We do appreciate it. Sub if you would like as well. It does help support all these Umbrella podcasts here under Prediction. So really appreciate it. But thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. Now, one other quick announcement. We are going to be doing a time change when it comes to our podcast show. So we ideally are going to keep things on Monday. Again, this week a little different, but it is going to be Monday still. But we're going to move it to 7 p.m. Eastern. So a couple hours later from when we have been doing it in the past. So a little bit of a time change there. Hopefully it doesn't affect you guys too much, but as always, you can check us out on Spotify, iTunes, etc. You know where to go for our podcast. But until next time, have a good night. We'll see you then.